So in the last class we completed chapter 3. Okay, so today we are going to start chapter 4 of Canto 1, the appearance of Sri Narada. Okay. So, so these are the divisions. So this comparatively this is a simpler chapter, okay, compared to the first 3 chapters, and the divisions are also simple. Okay. So in the first 13 verses, there are further questions by Shaunaka Rishi, because all the questions which are asked in the first chapter has been answered by Sutta Goswami in the second and third chapter. Okay, so now there are further questions. Shaunaka Rishi points out, or he's prompting Sutta Goswami to speak more. Okay, so there are further questions by Shaunaka Rishi. Okay, so we'll see the subdivisions as we go through the verses. Then from 14th to 25th, we speak about Srila Vyasadev's contribution in terms of what he did for the welfare of all people in Kali Yuga. Okay. And from 26 to 31, Vyasadev's dissatisfaction is expressed in these verses. And then 32 and 33 speak about Narad Muni's arrival. Okay. So broadly there are only 4 categories. There are further questions by Shaunaka Rishi, then Srila Vyasadev's contribution, and even after going through, even after giving so much, still Vyasadeva was dissatisfied. And Narad Muni's arrival. Okay. Next one. Vyasa uvacha iti bruvanam samstuya muninam dirghasatrinam vriddha kulapati sutam vahvricha shaunako braveet. On hearing Sutta Goswami speak thus, Shaunaka Muni, who was the elderly, learned leader of all the rishis engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows. Okay, so if you remember, in the last few verses, in the third chapter, there was a discussion about Srimad Bhagavatam, where Sutta Goswami says that he is going to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam. So the first couple of verses, where Shaunaka Rishi is addressing Sutta Goswami, you will see how excited he is, with this whole idea that Srimad Bhagavatam is going to be spoken. So Vyasadeva says that Sutta Goswami, after hearing Sutta Goswami like this, Shaunaka Rishi, then he speaks, congratulating Sutta Goswami. In purport, Srila Prabhupada explains the qualifications of the congratulator, or the one who is the leader of the hearers. Those who are hearing, the leader, he should be the one who congratulates. Okay. So he must be the leader of the house, an elderly man, and he must be vastly learned also. Okay. Then he speaks about realization. And he says that Sutta Goswami will speak, from personal realization. And what that personal realization is explained. Srila Prabhupada explains here. He says personal realization does not mean that one should, out of vanity, attempt to show one's own learning by trying to surpass the previous Acharya. Okay, so our mode is not to do something more than the previous Acharya. The mode is to serve the previous Acharya or our spiritual master. Okay, it's not try to become like him or not try to surpass him or show our scholarship saying how much we know. That is not the idea. One must have full confidence in the previous Acharya, and at the same time, one must realize the subject matter so nicely that he can present the matter for the particular circumstances in a suitable manner. Okay, and this is possible when there is a understanding of the subject matter or realization of the subject matter very nicely. Okay, then only it's possible. The original purpose of the text must be maintained. Okay, this is the principle. No obscure meaning should be screwed out of it, yet it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. This is called realization. Okay. So realization means no obscure meaning should be screwed out of it. Okay. Vague meanings. And it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. So depending upon the audience, the speaker should be able to grasp their attention by presenting it in such a way that they are able to understand it. At the same time, maybe they don't sleep, and at the same time, they grasp their attention also. Okay. So that's realization. No learned man should be willing to hear a person who does not represent the original Acharya. Verse 2. Shaunaka uvacha suta mahabhaga vadano vadatambara Katham Bhagavatim Punyam Yadaha Bhagavachukah. Shaunaka said, O Suta Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Shukdeva Goswami. So, although Shaunaka Rishi is expressing his excitement and his fortune, basically, because that's why it is Suta, O Suta, you are so fortunate, Mahabhaga, Vadano, Vadatamvara, please speak to us. Okay, you are the best of those who can speak. Katham Bhagavatim Punyam. You mentioned that you are going to speak about Bhagavatam, so please, we are very eager to hear. Please speak Bhagavatam. That which you have heard from Shukdev Goswami, Bhagavan Shukaha. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada says, no, Suta Goswami is twice addressed herein by Shaunaka Goswami out of great joy, because he and the members of the assembly were eager to hear the text of the Bhagavatam uttered by Shukdev Goswami. Generally, the so-called Bhagavatam reciters are either professional readers or so-called learned impersonalists who cannot enter into the transcendental personal activities of the Supreme Person. Okay, because both of them have no interest on the Supreme Lord. One is interested only about his own, how much money he can make or how much pride or prestige he gets. And the other person, the impersonalist, who is learned, anyway he has nothing to do. He has no idea about the Supreme Lord. Okay, what he does is basically explanation of the Srimad Bhagavatam from a speculative point of view. Okay, so he also has no interest on the Supreme Person. But those who speak on Srimad Bhagavatam, they should have personal inclination or personal attraction to the Supreme Lord. Okay, they should be engaged in devotional service. They should know that the goal of life is devotional service. Okay, only those can speak on Srimad Bhagavatam, others cannot. Okay. So impersonalist twists the meanings out of Bhagavatam to suit and support impersonalist views. Right? Bhagavatam is it's very famous. In the learned circles, Srimad Bhagavatam is extremely famous. Okay, and people take, just like this, Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita introduction also, that there are more than 600 commentaries on Bhagavad Gita. Why? Why someone has to write, not someone, but many people have to write so many commentaries? Because it's popular. And using Bhagavad Gita, you can make money or you can use it for so many purposes that way. But that is not the original intention, or that is not the original way or method to understand Bhagavad Gita. To understand Bhagavad Gita, you have to come in disciplic succession. Okay, and one should, as Prabhupada writes in the introduction, that one should at least theoretically accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? If you remember in the introduction, Prabhupada writes this. At least theoretically, that minimal inclination should be there to understand it. So what to speak of those who are presenting it? But here we see, Bhagavatam reciters and impersonalists, they have no such inclination. Then how can they speak on an exalted subject like Srimad Bhagavatam? So therefore we should never hear from them. Okay? Only those who are inclined to devotional service, or those who have realized that the goal of their life is to render devotional service to Krishna, only they are eligible to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam. Nobody else. Okay. Only one who is prepared to present the Bhagavatam in the light of Shukdev Goswami, and only those who are prepared to hear Shukdev Goswami and his representative are bona fide participants in the transcendental discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. Verse 3. Kasmin yuge pravritteyam sthane vakena hetuna kutah sanchodita Krishna kritavan samhitam munihi. Okay, so from here the questions start. Okay, so first two verses speak about Shaunaka Rishi requesting Suta Goswami to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam. Suta Goswami has already declared that he is going to speak on Bhagavatam. So now Shaunaka Rishi is encouraging him. He congratulated him and now he is encouraging him that you please speak on Srimad Bhagavatam. And then there are further questions. Okay, so broadly we can say there are 4 divisions of questions that Shaunaka Rishi asks. Okay, first one was on Srimad Bhagavatam and how did Srila Vyasadeva compile it? Okay, when did he compile it? Where did he compile it? Or why he compiled it? And how he compiled it? How did the disciplic succession come through? So these questions are being asked. Okay. Then from 4 to 8, there are questions about Shukdev Goswami. Okay, so if you see in the previous chapter, verse 40. Okay, so the Goswami says that Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God. It's compiled by Srila Vyasadeva. Okay, and it's meant for ultimate good of all people. Then he tells that Shukadeva Srila Vyasadeva, then he extracted, he wrote this, he compiled this after extracting the cream of all Vedic literatures. So now this is about Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, and then in the 42nd verse, he says that Shukadeva Goswami was taught. Or maybe it was there in the previous verse. Okay, Shukadeva Goswami was taught. Yeah, Vyasadeva delivered it to his son. He delivered it to his son, Shukadeva Goswami. And Shukadeva Goswami spoke this to Parikshit Maharaj. Okay, so till this point, now he has spoken about which scripture is going to speak on, which is Srimad Bhagavatam. Then he introduced that, okay, Srila Vyasadeva is the one who compiled it. Vyasadeva delivered it to his son Shukadeva Goswami. And Shukadeva Goswami in turn spoke it to Parikshit Maharaj. And I was there when this was done. So therefore I heard it from him. So now Shaunaka Rishi wants to know about these four. Srimad Bhagavatam, what Vyasadeva, Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. Okay, so these questions pertain to that. So first section would be on Srimad Bhagavatam and Srila Vyasadeva. Then questions about Shukadeva Goswami, and we'll have questions about Parikshit Maharaj. Okay. So the third verse is basically a question on Srimad Bhagavatam and Srila Vyasadeva. It says, in what period, Kasmin Yuge, in which yuga or in which period was it? Pravritteyam, it was began. Sthane, where it was spoken. Kena Hetuna, what was the cause, what was the reason why this was spoken. Kutha Sanchodita Krishna, and who inspired Krishna Dvaipana Vyasa, who inspired him. Okay, and Kritavan Samitam Munihi. In what period, in what place was this first begun, and why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? Now he's dwelling a little bit more into this Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. Srila Prabhupada writes, because Srimad Bhagavatam is a special contribution of Srila Vyasadeva, there are so many inquiries by the learned Shaunaka Muni. It was known to him that Srila Vyasadeva had already explained the text of the Vedas in various ways, including in the Mahabharata, which is for the understanding of the less intelligent women, Shudras and fallen members of the families of twice born. And Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental to all. So it was known to Shaunaka Rishi that Srila Vyasadeva had already divided the Vedas, then he has compiled the Puranas and Itihasas, and then he also wrote this Vedanta Sutra. So now, what was the necessity? Srimad Bhagavatam, it is so exalted. What was the necessity? When was it spoken? Why was it spoken? So these many inquiries are coming up now. Text 4. Tasya putro mahayogi samadrim nirvikalpakaha ekantamatirunnitro gudho mudha iveyate. His son, Vyasadeva's son, was a great devotee. Mahayogi. Okay. An equibalanced monist whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person. Okay. Yeah. So Srila Prabhupada writes that the liberated soul and the conditioned soul have different engagements. Okay. And then he gives an explanation, because here it's specifically mentioned in this verse that he was engaged in monism, or he had oneness of mind. He was not attracted, or he was not infected with anything material. Okay. It was completely spiritual. It was completely on spiritual platform. So, and Ekantamatir, right? His mind was focused on only one thing. It was completely on the spiritual platform. So Srila Prabhupada on this context speaks about the conditioned soul and liberated soul. And he says, while the conditioned soul thus dreams about spiritual engagements, the liberated soul is awake. Okay, let's see the context. The liberated soul is always engaged in the progressive path of spiritual attainment, which is something like a dream for the conditioned soul. Just like the dream is imaginary, it does not have any factual existence. So when the liberated soul, the activities of the liberated soul, or activities of great devotees are just like dreams. It makes no sense to those who are conditioned. Okay, they think, oh, what are they doing? It has no sense for them. So while the conditioned soul thus dreams about spiritual engagements, the liberated soul is awake. Similarly, the engagements of a conditioned soul appears to be a dream for the liberated soul. Because The conditioned soul might think that what? It's not factual, whatever they're doing. But devotees, they know that whatever the conditioned soul is doing, it is actually not factual. Okay? It's actually not factual like this. Because it's temporary. Whatever they say is temporary. A conditioned soul and a liberated soul may apparently be on the same platform. Apparently means it's not factual. It may look like they are on the same platform because their activities look similar, but factually they are differently engaged. And their attention is always alert, either in sense enjoyment or in self-realization, respectively. Conditioned soul in sense enjoyment and liberated soul in self-realization. Okay. So now, so it's also a question because here Shaunaka Rishi asks, he's nirvikalpakaha, he's fixed in monism. Okay, he's fixed in that which is this impersonal aspect. Okay. So this same question will come again in the 7th chapter, 9th verse, where he will ask, so even though he was engaged, how did Srila Vyasadeva come to teach Shukdev Goswami, although he was transcendental to everything? Okay. He was an Atmarama. And the next verse will speak about this Atmarama verse. You know about the Atmarama verse? You have heard of it. Atmarama is Chamudeva. Yeah. Yes. So here Shaunaka Rishi is asking, okay, Shukdev Goswami, you said Shukdev Goswami, he spoke Srimad Bhagavatam, okay, and Vyasadeva taught him. So how is that? Because he's already engaged in transcendental, he's already in the transcendental position. So how is that he came to learn this Srimad Bhagavatam? So that's when Suta Goswami will speak this Atmarama verse, and he will say that even those who are Atmaramas, who are completely satisfied in the self, they are also attracted by the activities of the Lord. Okay. Yeah, so verse 4 to 8, there are questions about Shukdev Goswami. So 4th verse spoke about, it asked the question about Shukdev Goswami, and that he's indifferent to mundane activities. Okay. So 5th and 6th verse we will see, which basically explain, a similar theme, that Shukdev Goswami was indifferent to mundane activities. So how did he met a king, even though he was transcendently situated? Right? A king is a worldly man. Right? In a general sense of the term, we know also that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he did not meet Maharaj Pratap Rudra. He did meet at the end, okay, later, but he vehemently opposed meeting him because he considered Maharaj Pratap Rudra as a Vishayi, as one who is engaged in materialistic affairs. And it is not proper for a sannyasi or a transcendentalist to meet with worldly people. Okay. So now here, Shaunaka Rishi is expressing a similar kind of doubt. We're saying, okay, Shukdev Goswami was transcendentalist. And okay, there have been many rishis, there have been many rajas, many kings have been there, and they have all died. They have been born, they have been great kings, ruled over the whole world, and then they have passed away. So what prompted Shukdev Goswami to go to Parikshit Maharaj without any invitation and speak about Srimad Bhagavatam? Why did that happen? Okay, so this is his inquisitiveness. He's trying to ask. Not trying to, but he's asking these questions. Okay. So verse 5. Drishtvanuyantam rishimatmajam apyanagnam devyo hriya paridadhurna sutasya chitram tadviksha pritchati munau jagadustavastabasti stripum bhidanatu sutasya vivikta drishte. While Shri Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth, although Sri Vyasadeva himself was not naked. But they had not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified, and when looking at them made no distinction between male and female, but that the sage made such distinctions. Okay, again, the focus here is that Shukdev Goswami was transcendental. Okay, he did not see the differences between the material forms. Okay, male, female, or any other living entity for that matter. Okay. So Srila Prabhupada speaks about that we should distinguish between the body and the soul, not between male and female. Okay. So that is proper vision. If you are distinguishing between male and female, our vision is contaminated with the modes. Okay. But an intelligent person, rather than distinguishing between the different forms, the material forms, he should distinguish between what is matter and what is spirit. What is material and what is spiritual. What is body and what is soul. Okay. Yeah. So Srila Prabhupada says, one should therefore attempt to know the distinction between body and soul without any distinction between male and female. As long as such a distinction is there, one should not try to become a sannyasi like Shukdev Goswami. At least theoretically, one must be convinced that a living entity is neither male nor female. The outward dress is made up of matter by material nature to attract the opposite sex and thus keep one entangled in material existence. Okay, so this is the purpose. This is the purpose of these different forms in every species of life. You have the male form and the female form only to bind the living entity in the material world. Okay, that's the only reason. So therefore, one should see the distinction between body and soul, and not the distinction between male and female. Okay. The perfection of the spiritual vision is a liberated stage, and Srila Shukdev Goswami attained that stage. Srila Vyasadeva was also in the transcendental stage, but because he was in the householder's life, he did not pretend to be a liberated soul as a matter of custom. Okay, because a grahastha means he must distinguish between the male form and the female form. Okay, otherwise he cannot be a grahastha. Srila Prabhupada writes that also. Somewhere in this purport or in some other purport. Okay, it's here. Yeah, the householder has to distinguish between a male and female, otherwise he cannot be a householder. Right? Yeah. Verse 6. Katham alakshita paurai samprapta kurujangalan unmatta mukha jadavad vicharan gaja sahvaye. How was he, Srila Sukdev, the son of Vyasa, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hastinapura, now Delhi, after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala, appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded? So how was he recognized by the citizens? Okay. When he entered the city of Hastinapur, after wandering in the provinces of Kuru and Jangala, and he appeared like a madman, dumb and retarded for materialistic people. Okay, but he was transcendentally situated. So Srila Prabhupada speaks about how a sadhu is recognized by hearing and not by seeing. Okay, we don't recognize a sadhu by seeing his appearance, but a sadhu should be recognized by what he speaks. Okay, a sage is not therefore recognized by sight, but by hearing. One should approach a sadhu or great sage not to see, but to hear him. If one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, then there is no profit. Okay. So Shukdev Goswami was a sadhu who could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. Okay. He did not satisfy the whims of ordinary citizens. And when he spoke on the subject of Bhagavatam, then he was recognized because he never attempted jugglery like a magician. Outwardly he appeared to be a retarded dumb madman, but in fact, he was the most elevated transcendental personality. Okay, so this, so 4 to 6. No, this is about Shukdev Goswami being indifferent to mundane activities and being transcendentally situated. From the 7th and 8th verse is how he came to meet Parikshit Maharaj. Okay. Katham va pandaveyasya rajarsher munina saha samvada samabhutata yatresha satvati shrutihi. How did it so happen that King Parikshit met this great sage, making it possible for this great transcendental essence of the Vedas, Bhagavatam, to be sung to him? So how did that happen? What transpired? What were the instances? Why did Shukdev Goswami come to that place? And how is that the Parikshit Maharaj heard Shukdev Goswami? What are the circumstances? So these were the questions. So Srila Prabhupada writes that Srimad Bhagavatam is stated here to be the essence of the Vedas. Right? Where does it say? Yeah, Samvada Sambhutata Yatrisha Satvata Shrutihi. So Srila Prabhupada translates Satvati Shrutihi as the transcendental essence of the Vedas. Okay. And it is also called as Shuka Samhita because it was spoken by Shukdev Goswami. Sagodohana matram hi gruheshu gruhamedhinam abekshate mahabhagas tirthi kurvanstadashramam. He, Shukdev Goswami, was accustomed to staying at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked, and he did this just to sanctify the residence. So how is it possible that one who stays only till the time when the cow is milked into this Griheshu, Grihamedhinam, those people, those householders who are engaged in materialistic activities, how is it possible that he came to the king and spoke Srimad Bhagavatam for 7 days continuously? When he does not even stay in one place of the grahas, of the grihasthas, he stays only till the cow is milked. Okay. So these are the questions. Inquisitiveness by Shaunaka Rishi. Srila Prabhupada then speaks about the activities of one in renounced order of life. Okay, taking clue from how Shukdev Goswami was so renounced that he will not stay in the householder's place for a long time, and he would stay there only to sanctify their residence. Sanctify them, that's all. No, nothing else. Srila Prabhupada writes, from his activities, those who are in the renounced order of life and dedicated to the mission of preaching the message of Godhead should learn that they have no business with householders save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. Okay, so sadhus or those in the renounced order of life, they have no business with the householders. No business in blessing them so that the son can pass exams, so that they can get material opulence, so that the family disturbances can be removed. A sannyasi or renounced order, a person in renounced order of life, he does not have to do all these things, or he does not do all these things. He is there only to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. Okay, so not to bless them. And we have seen, even in the case of Srila Prabhupada, so many pious people used to come and then used to, or wanted to touch his feet, take his blessings like this. But Srila Prabhupada always spoke about Krishna consciousness. He did not entertain this pious men coming and blessing and all these things. One who is in the renounced order of life should not be allured by the glamour of the householder's worldly possessions and thus become subservient to worldly men. For one who is in the renounced order of life, this is much more dangerous than drinking poison and committing suicide. Okay. So one should never be attracted to the glamour of the householder's worldly possessions. One who is in the renounced order of life. Okay. Right. So from text 9. Now, it's the transition is, okay, he spoke about Shukdev Goswami. Shaunaka Rishi asked about Shukdev Goswami. And then he asked, how did he come to speak this Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj? And the transition is, okay, now about Parikshit Maharaj. There are questions about Parikshit Maharaj also. So 9 to 12 speak about that. 9th verse, he says that Parikshit Maharaj, please speak about Parikshit Maharaj because he is a great first class devotee. Okay, so Srimad Bhagavatam is about Krishna and devotional service. And devotional service is incomplete without speaking about a devotee. Right? So Parikshit Maharaj is to be spoken about. And the 10 to 12 verses, Shaunaka Rishi will ask how he renounced or why he renounced all the possessing exalted qualities. Okay. Okay, yeah, we'll see. Text 9. Abhimanyu sutam suta prahur bhagavatottamam tasya janma mahashcharyam karmani cha granihi cha naha. Okay. It is said that Maharaj Parikshit was a great first class devotee of the Lord and that his birth and activities are all wonderful. Please tell us about him. Okay. So now it's mentioned here as Mahascharyam, or very wonderful. So Srila Prabhupada's purport is also about Maharaj Parikshit being so wonderful. So he says, the birth of Maharaj Parikshit is wonderful because in the womb of his mother, he was protected by the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna. His activities are also wonderful because he chastised Kali, who was attempting to kill a cow. His death is also wonderful because he got previous notice of his death. Right? That's amazing. No? Mm-hmm. You can know when you are going to die. It's amazing, right? You can prepare yourself nicely. Then he did not take food or drink, nor did he sleep a moment. So everything about him is wonderful, and his activities are worth hearing attentively. Okay. So the eagerness is expressed herein to hear about him in detail. Yeah. Text 10. ससम्राटकस्य वा हेतो पाण्डूनां मानवर्धनः प्रायोपविष्टो गङ्गायाम् अनादृत्याधिराट् श्रियम्. He was a great emperor and possessed all the opulences of his acquired kingdom. He was so exalted that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Why did he give up everything to sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death? He was a great emperor and he possessed all opulences, and he was very exalted also. He was a great devotee also. So one who is situated in is transcendentally, he is a great devotee. Why does he have to renounce everything? Why does he have to give up everything and sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death? Okay. Yeah, so there was nothing undesirable in his opulence and administration. Then why should he give up all the favorable circumstances and sit down on the bank of the Ganges, fasting till death? This is astonishing, and therefore all were eager to know the cause. Text 11. Namanti yatpataniketamātmanah Shivaya hānīya dhanāni shatravah Katham savīra shriyamanga dustyajām Yuvaishatot srashtumaho sahasuvihi. He was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed kingly opulences that were difficult to give up. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life? So Maharaj Parikshit had everything materially. There was enough milk, grains and metals, and all the rivers and mountains were full of potency. So materially everything was satisfactory. And Maharaj Parikshit was also a very pious king. He was powerful, he was chivalrous. Okay. So therefore there was no question of untimely giving up his kingdom and life. So the sages were eager to hear about all this. It's exciting in that way that Shukdev Goswami, who had nothing to do who was nothing to do materially, he came to speak to Parikshit Maharaj. Okay. And Parikshit Maharaj, even though he had everything materially, he was a great king. Okay, he was descendant of the Pandavas themselves, and he was a great devotee also. So now these two are very unlikely to come and meet each other. Okay, Maharaj Parikshit was a great devotee. Okay, and he was fully engaged in administering the king. So now he's in one side, and Shukdev Goswami, he's in the other side, who has nothing to do materially, who is always transcendently situated, and did not even want to stay with his father. Because he thought, he's a Grahastha. What am I doing in Grahastha life? Get out. But now he's speaking Srimad Bhagavatam Parikshit Maharaj. It's exciting. How did this meeting happen? How did this come about? Okay, so this is the mood of Shamantarshi here. So 12th verse. Shivaya lokasya bhavaya bhutaye ya uttama shloka parayana janaha jivanti natmarthamaso parashrayam mumocha nirvidhya kutah kalevaram. Those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead live only for the welfare, development and happiness of others. They do not live for any selfish interest. So even though the emperor Parikshit was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, in previous verse we saw how he was materially completely opulent, but still he was detached, or he was free from all attachment to worldly possessions. How could he give up his mortal body, which was the shelter for others? Right? So the king belongs to the citizens. Okay. So how did it happen that he had to give up his mortal body, which is the shelter of all the citizens? Okay. So Parikshit Maharaj is the ideal king, because since he was king for the all around welfare of the citizens, he was always busy in the welfare work of the public. So when we say all around, it basically means materially as well as spiritually. Okay. Not only for this life, but also for the next. He was always busy, this is the point. He was always busy in the welfare work of the public, not only for this life, means materially, but also for the next life. Right? He would not allow slaughterhouses or killing of cows. He was not a foolish and partial administrator, who would arrange for the protection of one living being and allow another to be killed. Okay, so this is a mocking statement for the present democratic government. Okay, so people will speak, there will lots of protest and hue and cry will happen if there's a human rights violation or if there's violence against human beings like this. But animals are being killed and nobody bothers. It's just a matter of choice. One can be vegetarian, one can be non-vegetarian. It's a matter of choice. They cannot even think beyond that and see. So many animals and so many birds have been killed. Not bother about them. So he says, these are foolish and partial administrators. Because he was a devotee of the Lord, he knew perfectly well how to conduct his administration for everyone's happiness. Men, animals, plants, and all living creatures. Okay, he was not selfishly interested. The king is the representative of the Supreme Lord, and therefore the king's interest must be identical with that of the Supreme Lord. Right? Makes sense. The Supreme Lord wants all living beings to be obedient to him and thereby become happy. Therefore, the king's interest is to guide all subjects back to the kingdom of God. So here when Srila Prabhupada writes about the king, it's basically the administrators. It's applicable to the administrators also in the present system of governance all over the world. Okay. So we are not speaking only about the monarchy, but also the presidents, the prime ministers of all the countries. They should be engaged like this. But they themselves are spiritually blind. It's like blind leading the blind. Okay. If all living beings are satisfied with food and shelter and obey the prescribed rules, there cannot be any disturbance between one living being and another. Okay. So the cause of all problems within this material world is lack of Krishna consciousness. Right? That's the conclusion. And an administrator or a ruler is supposed to implement this Krishna consciousness throughout the society. Okay. In whatever levels people are. It does not matter that if a person is a Brahmana, then he should be concentrated or he should be given all facilities for his spiritual advancement. But those who are Shudras and those who are lower than them, then they should be neglected. An administrator does not work like that, or a king should not work like that. He should have the welfare of everybody in his mind. It can be men, animals, plants, everybody. Okay. Now, after asking these questions, then he glorifies Sutta Goswami, saying that you are expert in these subject matters. Okay. One is because he learned from Shukdev Goswami, and also because an expert in all the Puranic histories, so you can recite the subject matter very nicely. So Shaunaka Rishi says, Tatsarvam na samachakshva prishto yadiha kinchana manye tvam vishaye vacham snatam manyatra chandasa. We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects except some portions of the Vedas, and thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. He is not expert in some portions of the Vedas. Yes. The Shrutis. Sutta Goswami is not expert in Shrutis. Prabhupada writes, I think he will speak about those who can recite mantras. Yeah, Vedic mantras and the Puranas. We will discuss this. Okay, we will discuss this after this chapter is complete because we have to finish it today. We'll come back to this verse. Okay, at that time. Brahmanas and Parivrajaka's. The difference between Vedas and the Puranas is like that between the Brahmanas and the Parivrajaka's. The Brahmanas are meant to administer some fruitive sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas, but the Parivrajakacharyas or learned preachers are meant to disseminate transcendental knowledge to one and all. Okay. And speaks about, Srila Prabhupada writes about Vedic mantras and the Puranas. So he says there is no difference also between the Vedic mantras and what is explained in the Puranas and Itihasas. There is no difference. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, it is mentioned in the Madhyadhina Shruti that all the Vedas, namely the Sama, Atharva, Rig, Yajur, Puranas, Itihasas, Upanishads, etc., are emanations from the breathing of the Supreme Being. Okay, so therefore they are non-different because the source is the same. Srila Sutta Goswami is following his footsteps, Shukdev Goswami's footsteps, and therefore his position is not the least less important because he was not expert in chanting Vedic mantras with metric pronunciation, which depends more on practice than actual realization. Realization is more important than parrot-like chanting. Right? So, we may not be very expert in reciting the Vedic mantras, but if the devotee has realization, then that's much, much more important than parrot line chanting of the Vedic mantras. Which is good, but realization is much, much more important. You can recite like an expert Vedic mantras, but if you're not engaged in devotional service, then it's useless. Shamayavani Kevalam. Okay. Now Suta Goswami starts to speak. Okay. So this is Vyasadev's contribution. So first verse he speaks about the birth of Srila Vyasadeva. Okay. And then how Vyasadeva saw the ill effects of this Kali Yuga, and to mitigate or to give guidance to people in this age of Kali, he simplified or divided the Vedic corpus for the welfare of all people. Okay, so this is a set of verses from 14 to 25. Suta uvacha dvapare samanuprapte tritiye yugaparyaye jata parashara yogi vasavyam kalaya hare. Suta Goswami said, when the second millennium overlapped the third, the great sage Vyasadeva was born to Parashara in the womb of Satyavati, the daughter of Vasu. Okay. Yeah, so Srila Prabhupada gives some technical details here. And he says that Vyasadeva was born of Parashar and Satyavati, who was the daughter of Vasu. Okay. Upadichara Vasu. Right? Upadichara Vasu, who was the king of Chedi. Right? He was Chedi king. Initially he was the king of the Chedi kingdom, and he was a good friend of Indra. Indra gave him a scepter to rule. And Upadichara Vasu ruled. He was a great devotee and he ruled his Chedi kingdom very nicely. So these details are mentioned in Mahabharata. Okay. And once I think by seeing one Apsara, I don't know, long time since I had this, by seeing an Apsara, then he got agitated, and then his semen fell, and then that's how Satyavati was born. And then Satyavati was, because she was born of a fish, so she was also called as Matsya Kanya. And then, or Matsya Gandha, and she was also born of a fish, if I remember correctly. Okay. And then, she was, two children were born. One was Satyavati and one was her brother. Her brother was taken as commander-in-chief by Upadichara Vasu, and Satyavati was then taken by the king of the fishermen. So that's how she remained in the king of this. What was his name? Adiraja. What is his name? Adirath, not Adirath, I think. Anyways, whoever it was, to whom then Maharaj Shantanu went and asked for Satyavati's hand like this. And she was engaged in transporting people from one bank of the river to the other bank. Okay. 15th verse. Sakadachit sarasvatya upasprushya jalam shuchihi vivikta eka asina udite ravi mandale. Once upon a time, he, Vyasadeva, as the sun rose, took his morning ablution in the waters of the Saraswati and sat alone to concentrate. The river Saraswati is flowing in the Badrikashram area of the Himalayas. So the place indicated here is Shamya Prasa in Badrikashrama, where Sri Vyasadeva is residing. Paravaragya sarishihi kale na vyaktaram hasa yugadharma vyatikaram praptam bhuvi yuge yuge. The great sage Vyasadeva saw anomalies in the duties of the millennium. This happens on the earth in different ages due to the unseen force of time. The people in general in this age of Kali are too much interested in matter, which is temporary. Because of ignorance, they are unable to evaluate the assets of life and be enlightened in spiritual knowledge. Okay. So when he says, this evaluate the assets of life. The assets of life is basically the human form itself. The human form itself is the asset of life. And Artha. Dharma and Artha. Because of ignorance, they are unable to evaluate the assets of life and be enlightened in spiritual knowledge. Yeah, we can say because they have attained the human form of life, they can follow Dharma and they can utilize those assets. But the asset of life, when in this particular context, should be this human form of life. Okay, because human form of life is the only form in which the possibility of spiritual enlightenment or spiritual knowledge, gaining spiritual knowledge exists. In animal form, it's not possible. Okay, so the assets of life is this human form itself. Even though it's a material form, but still, it's very conducive for spiritual enlightenment. But because people in the age of Kali are ignorant, they are not able to use, or they are not able to take or use these assets of life, this human form of life. Bhautikānām ca bhāvānām shakti-hāsam ca tattvitam ashraddadhānāni sattvān durmedhān hasitāyushah durbhagamscha janān vikshya munirdivyena chakshusha sarvavarnāshramānām yad dadhyau hitam amoghadrik. Okay. The great sage, who was fully equipped with knowledge, could see with his transcendental vision the deterioration of everything material due to the influence of the age. He could also see that the faithless people in general would be reduced in duration of life and would be impatient due to lack of goodness. Thus he contemplated for the welfare of men in all statuses and orders of life. Okay. Age of Kali, it diminishes everything material. In this age, the duration of material body of the people in general is much reduced, and so is the memory. The action of matter has also not so much incentive. Okay. So what it basically means is, even this material nature or the actions of matter, they also start reducing everything. So it's not only that human beings, they have reduced strength. What is that verse? Prayana Paisha Sabhya Kalavasmini Kejana Manda Sumanda Matayo Manda Bhagya Hipatrita. This is in relation to the human beings or to the animals. But even the actions of matter, that also has reduced. Okay. So the trees, they don't bear lots of fruits.
Actions of matter reduced.
Yeah, the trees don't bear much fruit. Okay. And the plants, they don't give much grains. And everything is diminishing. Okay. The heat has increased. There is no suitable environment. Now, heat has increased. Okay, cold has increased. Okay, even water. Water is not pure. You will not find pure water at many places. So even these actions of matter also, it reduces. Okay. Due to want of so many necessities of life, naturally the duration of life is reduced. The memory is short. Intelligence is meager. Mutual dealings are full of hypocrisy. And so on. You know what is hypocrisy? Oh, you know what is hypocrisy? Hypocrisy means you preach something and you do something else. Cheating. Yeah. Cheating, hypocrisy means you are preaching that, okay, you should do this, but you yourself will not do it. No? You cannot smoke a cigarette and tell someone not to smoke a cigarette. It's like that. So because it's full of hypocrisy, then people fight on that basis. But the transcendentalists, okay, even though the age of Kali diminishes everything, the transcendentalists are eager to render welfare service. So Vyasadeva, being a liberated soul, he saw all this through his transcendental vision, and he wanted to render welfare service for people. Okay, as an astrologer can see the future fate of a man, or an astronomer can foretell the solar and lunar eclipses, liberated souls can foretell the future of all mankind by seeing through the scriptures. Okay. So how do we know that Kali Yuga is not a conducive age, or it's an age of quarrel? Just by looking at it, And one more thing is by seeing the scriptures. Yes. And we substantiate, or we confirm that, okay, whatever the scripture tells, it's correct. Just by looking around. But anyway, here it said then the future of all mankind by seeing through the scriptures. By seeing through the scriptures, we can understand the current situation, or else it's not possible. It's very difficult. There will be many thoughtful people, okay, who might see, or who may be able to see who might be able to see the problems in this material world. But those who see through the scriptures, then they'll have a better understanding, okay, of how people suffer. For example, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about the sufferings of this material world at multiple places. And he also speaks about the divine and demoniac nature, about divisions of faith. So these things are manifested in front of us. but we will not be able to understand them properly, and we will not be able to understand how they are going to transpire in future. But through the Shastra Chakshu, through the eyes of the scriptures, these things could be understood. And we know, okay, if the society goes on like this, then it is meant to go to doom, it will get destroyed. In this age, people in general as well as their so-called leaders are all unlucky fellows, faithless in spiritual knowledge and influenced by the age of Kali. So because of these two, they are unlucky. The unfortunate men of this age are always reluctant to give a reception to the transcendentalists who are representative of Srila Vyasdev. And yet these selfless workers are always busy in planning something which may help someone in all statuses and orders of life. So, representative of Srila Vyasdev, they are always eager to help those in all the statuses and orders of life, right? This Sarva Varnashrama Yat, of all statuses and orders of life. The greatest philanthropists are those transcendentalists who represent the mission of Vyasa, Narada, Madhva, Chaitanya, Rupa, Saraswati, etc. They are all one and the same. The personalities may be different, but the aim of the mission is one and the same, namely to deliver the fallen souls back home, back to Godhead. Okay, so this is the mission. This is the mission of our movement, Krishna consciousness movement is the mission. That the mission is, or the aim is, to deliver the fallen souls back home, back to Godhead. Okay, so everything that we do in our life, all the study that we are doing, it's actually meant for that purpose, so that we can convince those who are not ready to be convinced, take up devotion service. Chaturhotram karma shuddham prajanam vikshya vaidikam vyatadhad yajyasan tatyai vedamekam chaturvidham. He saw that the sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas were means by which the people's occupations could be purified. And to simplify the process, he divided the one Veda into 4 in order to expand them among men. Okay, so from this verse onwards, right, this is 19th verse. Okay, so from this one onwards, now we are speaking about Vyasadeva's contribution for the welfare of all people. So what he did first is that to simplify the process, because he could see that the sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas were the means, were the methods by which people's occupations could be purified. So therefore, he simplified the process by dividing this one Veda into 4. Srila Prabhupada writes that division, formerly there was only one Veda of the name Yajur, and then it was divided into 4 divisions of Rig, Yajur, Sama and Atharva. And then there are the Puranas, the Mahabharatas, the Samhitas, which are known as the 5th Veda. The Puranas and Mahabharata were made from the related historical facts which explain the teaching of the 4 Vedas. And this is mentioned specifically in the Chandogya Upanishad. Okay. Okay, verse 20. Rigyaju samarthavakya vedaschatvara udhritaha itihasa puranam cha panchamo veda uchyate. The 4 divisions of the original sources of knowledge, the Vedas, were made separately, but the historical facts and authentic stories mentioned in the Puranas are called the 5th Veda. Okay. Tatra Rigveda Dhara Paila Samago Jaimani Kavihi Vaishampayana Evaiko Nishnato Yajushamuta. After the Vedas were divided into 4 divisions, Paila Rishi became the professor of the Rig Veda, Jaimani became the professor of the Sama Veda, and Vaishampayana alone became glorified by the Yajur Veda. So different Vedas, after Srila Vyasdeva divided different Vedas, he entrusted that into different disciples. And what the disciples do, we will see. Atharvangira Samasi Sumantur Daruno Munihi Itihasa Purananam Pitame Roma Harshanaha. The Sumantu Muni, Angira, who was very devotedly engaged, was entrusted with the Atharva Veda, and my father Roma Harshana was entrusted with the Puranas and historical records. Okay. Text 23. Ta etarshayo vedam swam samvyasyananekadha Shishye prashishye vedaste shakhino abhavan. All these learned scholars in turn rendered their entrusted Vedas onto their many disciples, grand disciples, and great grand disciples, and thus the respective branches of the followers of the Vedas came into being. Okay. Vedas is the only source of knowledge. So Srila Prabhupada says, there are no branches of knowledge, either mundane or transcendental, which do not belong to the original text of the Vedas. They have simply been developed into different branches. They were originally rendered by great respectable and learned professors. No one, therefore, can claim independent knowledge beyond the Vedas. So even all this material advancement that we see around us, they also are sourced from the Vedic literatures only. Okay, so this is what it means. What Prabhupada writes here. We see so much material advancement of knowledge, so much technology is there. And people claim knowledge independent of the Vedas. But Srila Prabhupada is very clear that there is no branch of knowledge, either mundane or transcendental, which do not belong to the original text of the Vedas. So all the knowledge, even the mundane knowledge in this material world, they can be traced back to the original Vedic literatures. Okay. And it says, respective branches of the followers of the Vedas. So we see that people you might have heard of this surnames from Chaturvedi, Dvivedi, and Trivedi, like this. So they are supposed to be learned in one of the Vedas, or they should be learned in 2 Vedas, 3 Vedas, like this. And even in Brahminical families, if you see, initially, before this Kali Yuga, the Brahmanas are supposed to know all the Vedas. Okay, but because their memory has reduced, now different shakhas or different branches are there, and different branches of Brahmanas or different sects of the Brahmanas, they are considered expert in only one section of the Vedas. Okay, so among the Smarta Brahmanas, you will find those who follow only Krishna Yajurveda. So not only Yajurveda, then there's a shakha of Krishna Yajurveda, and that shakha will be explained by one of the Dharma Sutras, like this. So it has been divided. So that way, people's lifestyle has been made simplified. Okay, but as Kali Yuga progresses, even maintaining or even learning these Vedic literatures and conducting one's life according to them also becomes very difficult. So that's why Srila Vyasadeva also made this or compiled the Mahabharata for the Stri, Shudra and Vijabandhus. We will see in the next verse. Yes, next verse. Ta eva veda durmedher dharyante purushair yatha evam chakara bhagavan vyasa kripana vatsalah. Thus the great sage Vyasadeva, who is very kind to the ignorant masses, edited the Vedas so they might be assimilated by less intellectual men. Okay, this is what he meant. It's divided into different branches, shakhas, so that those who are less intellectually inclined, or who don't have much memory, they can also follow the Vedic process, and by that they can purify themselves. That was the original intention of dividing the Vedas. Okay. So Brahminical quality is required to understand the Veda. Srila Prabhupada says, the seed of all knowledge or the Veda is not a subject matter which can easily be understood by any ordinary man. A class of men who claim Brahminical qualifications simply by their birthright in the family of a Brahmana also claim that the study of the Vedas is a monopoly of the Brahmana caste only. Another section of the people take this as an injustice to members of other castes who do not happen to take birth in a Brahmana family. But both of them are misguided because both of them have missed the purpose for which Vyasadeva divided the Vedas. Right? The purpose was so that they can purify themselves. Right? We saw that 2 verses back. And Vyasadeva simplified the Vedas because he saw that as a means that people can purify themselves by following their occupational duties. Right? That was the verse. Now, these Brahmanas who claim that study of Vedas is a monopoly of the Brahmana because they have been born in a Brahmana family, they are not doing it for the sake of purifying themselves. It's just a question of pride. Okay, that's all. And those who think that it's an injustice and we should also be allowed to study the Vedas, so that they can also claim to have a higher position in the society. They are also misguided, because the process or the goal is not to elevate yourself socially, but the process is to elevate yourself spiritually, to become purified. Okay. So this whole idea that I also want to be on the level of Brahmana so that I can be respected, it's all completely mundane, and it's completely against the aim or the mission of Srila Vyasadeva in dividing the Vedas. Right? His mission is to purify people, not to elevate them socially and make them proud. Okay. So the subject matter can be understood only by persons with exceptional quality of goodness. Okay. So birthright is not the qualification. Exceptional quality of goodness is to understand the subject matter. So therefore, Veda is divided for benefiting less intelligent people. In the present age, the mode of goodness is almost nil. And so, for the general mass of people, the kind-hearted, powerful sage, Srila Vyasadeva, divides the Vedas in various ways so that they may be practically followed by less intelligent persons in the modes of passion and ignorance. It is explained in the next shloka as follows. Right? So, when we say Srila Vyasadeva divides the Vedas, so it also includes his compilation of the Puranas and Itihasas and Mahabharata also. Okay, because everything is meant for the welfare of people. Okay. Stri Shudra Dvija Bandhunam Traina Shruti Gochara Karma Shreyasi Mudhanam Shreya Evam Bhavediha Iti Bharatamakyanam Kripaya Munina Kritam. Out of compassion, the great sage thought it wise that this would enable men to achieve the ultimate goal of life. Thus he compiled the great historical narration called the Mahabharata for women, laborers and friends of the twice born. Okay. Garbhadhan Samskara and initiation. Twice born. So these are the two methods. No? First birth, first qualified birth is through Garbhadhan Samskara. And second qualification or second qualified birth is through Diksha, the process of initiation. Then only he becomes twice born. Okay. The friends of the twice born families are those who are born in the families of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, or the spiritually cultured families, but who themselves are not equal to their forefathers, because the purificatory process of Garbhadhana Samskara has not been performed. Okay. One birth is calculated during the seed-giving samskara, and the second birth is calculated at the time of spiritual initiation. Only one who has been able to undergo such important samskaras can rightly be called twice born. Right? So one birth is during the actual birth, okay, when the seed is given, when the husband gives the seed to the wife, and the second birth is calculated at the time of spiritual initiation during Diksha process. Okay, then only he can be called twice born. Others who do not undergo this process, they are all friends of the twice born or Vijabandhu, who are relatives of the twice born. If the father and the mother do not undertake the process of spiritual family planning and simply beget children out of passion only, their children are called Vijabandhus. The Shudras and the women class do not have to undergo any samskara save and except the ceremony of marriage. Okay. Devoid of necessary qualifications to understand the import of the transcendental Vedas. So what's the context? The learned, the less intelligent class of men, namely women, Shudras and unqualified sons of the higher castes, are devoid of necessary qualification to understand the import of the transcendental Vedas. Okay. Because they are influenced more by the mode of passion and ignorance. Okay. That's the reason why Shudras and Vijabandhus, they are not qualified to understand the import of the Vedas. If we see in the previous purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the subject matter is understood by persons with exceptional quality of goodness. Okay, so what disqualifies the Shudras or the Stri, women class or the twice born is this. They are not primarily situated in the mode of goodness, which basically means that they're more materially inclined. Okay, but if they take up the devotional process, everybody can be elevated. Yepi supapayoneha striyo vaishyas tatha shudras tepi yanti paramgatim. Krishna says. Okay. So, for those who are devoid of necessary qualification to understand the import of the transcendental Vedas, Mahabharata is administered to them. Therefore, within the Mahabharata is placed the Bhagavad Gita, the commentary, the summary Veda. The less intelligent are more interested in stories than philosophy. And therefore, the philosophy of the Vedas is included within the Mahabharata in the form of the Bhagavad Gita, spoken by Lord Sri Krishna. Okay, and Bhagavad Gita is the Vedanta philosophy. The Vedanta philosophy is the subject matter for study by the spiritual graduates. Only the postgraduate spiritual student can enter into the spiritual or devotional service of the Lord. It's a great science, and the great professor is the Lord himself in the form of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So now Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur he says that in Mahabharata these two things are very important. One is Sri Vishnu Sahasranam and one is Bhagavad Gita. So Mahabharata has its importance only because of these two things. Vishnu Sahasranam and Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So there are so many stories, huge, so many verses before it's come to Bhagavad Gita, because and so much about dharma, artha, and all these aspects have been discussed in all the different parvas of Mahabharata. But finally, it's supposed to lead one to Bhagavad Gita, which itself is a difficult subject to understand for those who are in the mode of passion and ignorance. But because so much is there before the Bhagavad Gita is spoken, and so much about dharma has been spoken, and one is supposed to inculcate that the aspects of dharma in his life, then by doing that process, by following the process mentioned in the Mahabharata, which are learnt from the activities of great personalities like the Pandavas and the Yadus, and by following them in their life, people, Stri, Shudra, Dvijabandhus, they elevate themselves, they purify themselves. And when they finally come to this Bhishma Parva, where Bhagavad Gita is spoken, then they have attained the qualification to some extent to understand this Vedanta philosophy, which is explained in Bhagavad Gita. So that's the point. Okay, so Mahabharata speaks so much about dharma at the start only for upliftment or purification of these people who are mostly engaged in passion and ignorance, mostly influenced by passion and ignorance. So they follow through the stories. They follow they go through their life like this. Then they get qualification to understand Bhagavad Gita as it is. एवं प्रवृत्तस्य सदा भूतानां श्रेयसी द्विजाः सर्वात्मकेनापि यदा नातुष्यधृदयं ततः. Okay. O twice born Brahmanas, still his mind was not satisfied, although he engaged himself in working for the total welfare of all people. Right? So even though he worked for anyway, we will see. Nati prasiddha dhridayah sarasvatyastate shuchau vitarkayan viviktastha idam chovacha dharmavit. Thus the sage, being dissatisfied at heart, at once began to reflect, because he knew the essence of religion, and he said within himself. Okay. So, see, the point is that even though he engaged himself in working for the total welfare of all people, right? So, in that way, all classes of people are covered. The Brahmanas, okay, the Vedas have been divided. Okay, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, chalo, Veda has been divided. Okay, and now we have the Sudras, Stri, Dvijabandhus, all these people. Okay, Puranas, Itihasas, Mahabharata is given. Everything has been done. So, all classes of people have been covered by Srila Vyasadeva. So it seems that his focus in doing this was so that everybody could get benefited. Okay. But then when he was not satisfied with all that, then he could understand. We will see in the verses. He could understand that it was not a question of covering all people within the Vedic fold, but it was a question of giving them the essence of all Vedic literatures. Okay. It was not a question of covering the whole classes of people, but it was a question of giving the essence of the Vedic literatures. So he has covered all classes of people, right? But if it's not giving the essence, then what's the point? There's no point behind it, right? But if he gives the essence to all classes of people, then his work is complete. So he has completed his job half. All people are covered, all classes of people are covered, but the essence is not mentioned. So this is just the cause of his dissatisfaction. Okay. So because he knew the essence of religion. Basically, he knew that devotional service to the Lord is the topmost activity. So, he started contemplating within himself. And Srila Prabhupada writes, perfection is never attained until one is satisfied at heart. right? So if you are not satisfied at heart, then you know, okay, still there's some way to go. When a person is not fixed in the activities of devotional service, then he does not attain complete satisfaction. So from practical point of view, if our whole attitude or our mood is not devotionally inclined, and some way or other in between, we say, okay, maybe some sense gratification for half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, okay, relax the mind, something like that. If we do, then it results in dissatisfaction of the heart. Okay, because once one takes to Krishna consciousness, then unknown, at least in the initial, there's so much satisfaction in the heart that when he goes back to the material sphere of life, then he starts suffering more than a materialistic person suffers. Okay, he has more frustration, he's more disheartened that way. So he has to come back to devotional service. Krishna will not leave him, he'll be pulled back like this. So one who has got the taste of devotional service, it's very, very difficult or almost impossible for him to completely go away from devotional life, unless and until he's completely bewildered or completely illusioned. Because nothing else will satisfy the heart. Nothing else apart from Krishna consciousness can ever satisfy the heart. Okay. So because Srila Vyasadeva did not explain this particular essence of Vedic literatures, therefore he did not feel satisfaction in the heart. Okay. So from speaker's point of view also, for those who are speaking, if they are not giving the message of Bhagavad Gita as it is, of Srimad Bhagavatam, as it is presented by Shukdev Goswami, as presented by Srila Vyasadeva, then speaker also does not feel satisfaction in the heart. Okay, but if the actual message is being spoken, so Suta Goswami, when he speaks, he's very excited because he is going to speak about Srimad Bhagavatam and is not going to deviate from, because yathaditam yathamatihi, right? He is not going to deviate from what Shukdev Goswami speaks. So it's a bliss for both the hearer as well as the speaker. Both are happy, both are satisfied because they're not going to present anything and they're not going to hear anything which is non-different from the essence of all the Vedic literatures. Okay. 28 and 29. Dhritavritena hi maya chandamsi guravognayah manita nirvyalikena grahitam chanushasanam bharatavyapadeshena hyamna yarthascha darshitah drishyate yatra dharmadi stri shudradi bhirapyuta. Vyasadeva is contemplating now. So I have under strict disciplinary vows unpretentiously worship the Vedas, the spiritual masters and the altar of sacrifice. I have also abided by the rulings and have shown the import of disciplic succession through the explanation of the Mahabharata, by which even women, Shudras and others, friends of the twice born, can see the path of religion. Okay, so Vyasadeva's contemplation is, I am equipped with everything that's required by the Vedic literatures to present a subject matter, and I have covered all classes of people also. Okay. So Prabhupada says, no one can understand the import of the Vedas without having undergone a strict disciplinary vow in disciplic succession. Okay. So perfect knowledge means parampara. Right? This is our statement. Perfect knowledge can be gained only through the parampara system. So perfect knowledge means the ultimate import of the Vedic literatures. Import means essence. Okay. So his job should be complete because he thought of welfare of all people, including Stri, Shudra and Dijabandhu. But his dissatisfaction was not due to not including some sections of people, but due to not explaining the actual essence of all scriptures. Right? So this is the important point. 30. Tathapi batame dehyo hyatma chaivatmana vibhuhu asampanna iva bhati brahma varchasya sattamaha. I am feeling incomplete, though I myself am fully equipped with everything required by the Vedas. Purification of the living beings submerged in matter is made possible by the prescribed activities in the Vedas, but the ultimate achievement is different. Unless it is attained, the living being, even though fully equipped, cannot be situated in the transcendentally normal stage. Okay, so purification can only take you so far. It can situate you in the mode of goodness. It can situate us in the mode of goodness. But beyond that, if we have to attain the transcendental stage, then one should engage himself in the essence of all Vedic literatures. Okay. So by prescribed activities, one can elevate himself to Sattva-guna. But if he has to go beyond Sattva-guna, then devotional service, essence of all Vedic literatures. is required. So Srila Vyasadeva appeared to have lost the clue and therefore felt dissatisfaction. Okay. So sometimes we do something with some intention, but then when we are doing something, we get completely deviated from the original process and end up somewhere else. So something like that. Okay. So Vyasadeva, he wanted to do welfare for people and then he wanted to simplify the Vedas, but in the process, he missed out in giving the essence properly. Even though he had some idea, he gave Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu Sahasranama, things like that. And in the Puranas also he explained the glories of Krishna, but that does not really bring out the actual essence because it's inviting people to engage themselves in the more of the purificatory processes. Now we saw the previous few verses back that Srila Vyasadeva thought that dividing the Vedas will simplify it and people can get purified by following the prescribed activities. Right? Remember that verse? Yeah, that verse was there. Okay. So, his focus was on purification, so that they can elevate themselves. And Krishna's topics are the only thing which will purify. So, he sprinkled that in different Vedic literatures. And he explained the Vedanta philosophy also in Bhagavad Gita. But that did not, it did not bring out very definitively that devotional service is the actual goal of life. Okay. So, purification is not the actual goal. That's what Srila Prabhupada writes here, Purification of the living being submerged in matter is possible by prescribed Vedic activities. So that's why Vyasadeva divided the Vedic literatures. Fine. But even though the living being, even though fully equipped that way, cannot be situated in transcendental normal stage if he does not attain the ultimate achievement. So it is pure devotion service without any tinge of karma, jnana, any other yoga processes like this. So this is what was lacking in Srila Vyasadeva. Not lacking in Srila Vyasadeva, lacking in his presentation. Okay. Vyasadeva did not like in anything. Kimva bhagavata dharma na prayena nirupitaha priya paramahamsanam sa eva hyachyuta priyaha. This may be because I did not specifically point out the devotional service of the Lord, which is dear both to perfect beings and to the infallible Lord. Okay, because it pleases both. It is dear, it pleases both the perfect beings, the liberated souls, and it also pleases the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay. So unless one is fixed in the normal condition of service, neither the Lord nor the living being can become fully satisfied. Okay, so even Krishna is not fully satisfied if we do not engage in devotion service. This obviously we have to take in perspective, we have to take in context. Not that the Lord is lacking in something, but from the living entity's point of view, he desires the living entity to render devotional service to him. And that way, when the living entity is not doing that, then there is some amount of dissatisfaction in him also. Okay.
What is this division?
Yeah, division is 32 and 33 is Narada's arrival. Okay. So now 26 to 30 we saw that Vyasadeva contemplates on his dissatisfaction. So even though I have done all these things, I am equipped by the Vedas, I have covered all classes of people, everything is there, but still he was feeling dissatisfaction. And 31st, he himself could understand the cause of dissatisfaction. Okay. And 32 and 33, Narada Muni will come and he will confirm the actual reason. Tasyaivam khilamatmanam manyamanasya khidyatah krishnasya narado bhyagad ashramam pragudahritam. Narada reached the above mentioned cottage of Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa on the banks of the Saraswati, just as Vyasadeva was regretting his defects. Okay. Although Vyasadeva was an empowered divinity, he still felt dissatisfaction because in none of his works were the transcendental activities of the Lord properly explained. Okay. And the inspiration was infused by Sri Krishna directly in the heart of Vyasadeva, and thus he felt a vacuum, as explained above. It is definitely expressed herewith that without the transcendental loving service of the Lord, everything is void. Right? But that in the transcendental service of the Lord, everything is tangible, without any separate attempt at fruitive work or empiric philosophical speculation. Okay. Devotional service to the Lord, tangible service to the Lord, surrender to the Lord, achieves or completes everything. Tam abhighyaya sahasa pratyuthaya gatam munihi pujayamasa vidivad naradam pujayamasa vidivan Naradam Surapujitam. At the auspicious arrival of Sri Narada, Sri Vyasadeva got up respectfully and worshipped him, giving him veneration equal to that given to Brahmaji, the creator. Okay, so Vidhi means Brahma, the first created living being. And he gave respect to Sri Narada. Okay, thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 4th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Appearance of Sri Narada. So what we discussed is, first was further questions by Shaunaka Rishi, where he requests to speak, or he requests Sutta Goswami to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam. Then he asked questions on 4 different themes on Srimad Bhagavatam, how Srila Vyasadeva came to compile it, questions about Shukdev Goswami, and questions about Maharaj Parikshit. And that Sutta Goswami is the most qualified person in answering these questions. Then Sutta Goswami starts his replies, and first he speaks about Vyasadeva's contribution. Okay, so this is basically addressing the reason, when this, why or how was it spoken. Okay, when was it spoken, where was it spoken. So all those things, this question on Srimad Bhagavatam and Srila Vyasadeva is what will be addressed in the next few chapters, 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th. Right, 7, till 7th, first portion, till the first few verses of 7th. Then after that, then he starts speaking about Maharaj Parikshit. Okay, and that will continue. That will continue till the end, and the 19th chapter, Shukdev Goswami will appear. So this is, these 4 themes will be addressed in the rest of the chapters of first canto. And your actual speaking or actual Bhagavatam, which Shukdev Goswami spoke, basically starts from 2nd canto only. Shukdev Goswami starts speaking only from canto 2. Okay, till that point, so many topics will be explained by Sutta Goswami. And in between, let's see the divisions also. So, in between, okay, this introduction to Bhagavatam is here. Then you have the narration of the appearance of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is chapter 5, 6 and initial portion of chapter 7. Then there is an introduction to Maharaj Parikshit. Right? You have the chapter 7 and initial portion of chapter 8, and then Kunti's and Bhishma's prayers. And from there, Sutta Goswami he diverts. Just like Vyasadeva got diverted a little bit. He also diverts into Krishna's glories. The separation, this chapter 10 and chapter 11, where Krishna leaves Hastinapur and then he enters Dwarka. That is chapter 10 and chapter 11, which is not actually in the flow of describing about Maharaj Parikshit. Okay, but still it's introduced in between. Okay, so after this, then Shaunaka Rishi will prompt, can we continue with Maharaj Parikshit narration? So then the birth of Maharaj Parikshit will be explained in chapter 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, like that. And then finally, Shukdev Goswami will appear in chapter 19. Okay, so this is the flow. Don't worry about this. Okay, as we go through the chapters, we'll tell you what is happening. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so there is some time, so we can take questions. Okay, the question is that in Vishnu Purana also, it also speaks about the same subject matter as Srimad Bhagavatam is what to say, but it's not the same subject matter, because Vishnu Purana also speaks about the other aspects. I see one thing, just clarify, I'm not an expert in Vishnu Purana, but the Puranic histories are such that there is an impetus to also follow the Dharma, Artha and Kama and Moksha processes. Okay, so it is not completely transcendental in that way. All the Puranas are like that. The focus, you have to see the focus on what actually they are intending. So Vishnu Purana, yes, it has the glories of the Lord. Okay, but the intention also, the Dharma, Artha, Kama, and that intention is also there. That process are also mentioned there, which leads one or which diverts one to those kind of processes. So maybe that is why it's not considered. That's why it's not considered as a equivalent to Srimad Bhagavatam. And specifically in Srimad Bhagavatam, we have this Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Okay, this is the Paribhasha Sutra we discussed, right? So this establishes, Bhagavad Purana establishes the absolute truth as Sri Krishna. Okay, so that itself is the defining factor of Srimad Bhagavatam, you can say. And that's why it makes it transcendental. Or it gives the highest goal. See, the Goloka Vrindavan, in the spiritual world, is the highest destination. And Srimad Bhagavatam targets that highest destination by establishing that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Krishna is the Bhagavan Swayam. So that way you can say it's superior even to Vishnu Purana. And in Vishnu Purana there will be worship of Lord Vishnu, maybe from a desire for attaining dharma, artha, or for following dharma, and attaining artha and kama. So that's why it is not on the same level of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, you want to take questions now, or you want to see what do you want to do? Maybe we can go to the summary. Yes, okay. So first chapter, the first 3 verses are prelude to the Srimad Bhagavatam. It speaks about the Sambandha, Abhidheya and Prayojana. The first 3 verses. Okay. And then it gives an introduction of how the sages assembled in Naimisharanya under the leadership of Shaunaka Rishi with an intention to perform 1,000-year sacrifices. Fire sacrifices basically, seeing the ill effects of Kali. Just as Vyasadeva saw, similarly they also could understand there are, for the benefit of people, they also conducted sacrifice. And then when Suta Goswami arrives, and this is glorification of Suta Goswami and the qualifications of a bona fide speaker. And when there is a sincere listener and there's a sincere speaker or a qualified speaker, then questions and answers should start happening. Okay. So Shaunaka Rishi, he starts asking questions to Suta Goswami, and then there are these 6 questions. Okay. So from 9 to 13, then there are the first 3 questions. What is the ultimate good of all people? That's the 9th verse. Okay. Then 10th, it explains basically, okay, that this perennial Payashasabhya Kalavasya, this Kali Yuga people are unfortunate and always disturbed. So therefore, you please tell us that what is the essence of all scriptures and by which they can become happy. Yenatma Suprasidati. Because Kali Yuga and people in Kali Yuga are always disturbed. Correct? Disturbed, they have less intelligence, no memory. Already material world is miserable. And then on top of that, if you have so many miserable situations also in your life, how can that attain happiness? What is the essence of all scriptures which will give them lots of happiness, which will satisfy their heart? So that is your 11th question. So the 9th, 10th leads to the 11th question. What's the ultimate good for people? People are like this. So what will give them the highest happiness? Then it asks, what's the purpose behind the personality of God appearing in the womb of Devaki as the son of Vasudeva? Okay. So this is the 3rd question. Okay, for 14 to 16, glories of the holy name, Krishna Katha and devotees are mentioned. Okay. And from this, from the context, we can understand that Shaunaka Rishi already had some idea that the ultimate good for people should be related to Krishna Katha, should be related to devotees, should be related to the holy name. But still, he wanted to hear from the lotus lips of Suta Goswami, because he heard it from Shukadeva Goswami. They also know that. Then continuing the same theme of Krishna Katha, they wanted to know about his Purusha Avataras and Leela Avataras. That is your 17th and 18th question. Correct? Yeah, so 18th question is your Purusha Avataras and 17th question is your Leela Avataras. And then 21 to 23 is a further description about the age of Kali. And the 6th question as where did Dharma take shelter after Krishna left this world? So they have this idea, these sages, they know that when Krishna is there, Dharma is established. Okay, the essence of all scriptures or the essence or the rendering of devotional service is there. But after Krishna leaves this world, then what happens? Where does Dharma take shelter? Okay, so it takes shelter in Srimad Bhagavatam, so that will be answered. So this is the flow of the first chapter. Okay. It's very simple. Now you only have to concentrate on the first 3 verses, then the 6 questions, and that's it. Right? It ends there. Simple. Okay, so second. Second is a bit elaborate. Okay. So Suta Goswami first glorifies Shukadeva Goswami, his spiritual master, because having been asked these 6 questions, then first thing is to glorify your spiritual master. Then Suta Goswami offers prayers to the Supreme Lord and his devotees. Basically, first 5 verses are prayers, glorification and prayers. From 6 to 15, he establishes that the goal of all activity is affinity or devotional service for the Supreme Lord. And 6th and 7th verse answers the first two questions. That unalloyed devotional service is the ultimate good for all people. It will mitigate the bad effects of Kali Yuga, and it is the essence of all scriptures, and it will give satisfaction to the heart. So these all 3 points are covered from 6 to 7. And then the same thing is explained in terms of dharma. Bhakti and dharma, they are explained from 8 to 13. Okay. Where useless, Shama Eva Kevalam, that dharma is explained. Then how material sense gratification is not the goal. Okay. Then the 3 aspects of the absolute truth. Tat Bhavanti Tatapavidas. Then realization of the absolute truth by bhakti. And dharma, the highest dharma is to please the Lord. Okay, so we saw this. That 8 to 13 is your dharma and its purpose. And inquiry into the absolute truth should be the goal of people. And that's what leads to the 3 aspects of the absolute truth. Realizing the absolute truth, and highest dharma is to please the Lord. Okay. And 14 to 15, okay, it's basically establishing the same point, saying performing devotional service and its effect, and who will not be attracted. This who will not be attracted basically leads you to the next section. Okay. Of the from how we can attain attraction and how this bhakti progresses. So that is from 16 to 22. From 16 to 21 you have the different stages of devotional service with respect to this Adar Shraddha Tadha Sadhu Sangha. We saw that. Okay. And then this process is performed with great delight and is enlivening. Okay. So this is similar to Susukam Kartum Avayam. Second is Raja Vidya Raja Gohi Pavitra Vattamam Pratyaksha Avagam Dharmam Susukam Kartum Avayam. It's similar to that. This verse is similar to that. Okay. It's performed with great delight and it's enlivening. Okay. 23 and 25. So 23 25.
Stages in devotional service.
Yeah.
This Adar Shraddha Tadha Sadhu Sangha, like that it is there like that.
Yeah, from 16 to 21, we saw this, if you remember, or rather you should remember actually, that we saw this, correct? Each of the verses from 16th verse to 20th verse, they refer to one of the stages of devotional service.
16 to 20.
16 to 20. It's there in Bidekam, you can refer there. 16 to 21. Yeah, 16 to 20. Basically 16 to 20. 21 is reiterating the same point. So these stages are explained. See, this is derived from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, where he gives these 14 stages. Correct? Okay. Then, in context to the other Puranas and Vedic literatures, Sutta Goswami speaks that Lord Vishnu's worship is better than Lord Brahma's and Lord Shiva's worship because Lord Vishnu's worship is transcendental, it's beyond the 3 modes. Okay. And Lord Vishnu himself takes the Guna Avataras, takes the position of Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva through his expansions, through incarnating as Guna Avataras. And one people can get the ultimate benefit by worshipping Lord Vishnu. Right? So this section establishes that. Then also the next section 26 to 29 rejects all types of demigod worship. Okay, and establishes Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then from 30 to 34 the Supreme Lord creates the material world, but he is transcendental to it. And we saw that these 3, 30 to 33, we are talking about Purusha Avataras, but the focus is that they are beyond the modes. They are not affected by the creation process. Okay, they are beyond. This is the answer to the 5th question. This is the answer to the 5th question, and this is the answer to the 3rd question. 4th and 6th, the Leela Avataras and the Dharma, or where did Dharma take shelter. The 4th and 6th are explained in the 3rd chapter.
And the Leela, this Purusha Avataras?
Purusha Avataras is question 5, no?
Question 5.
Leela Avataras is in the 3rd chapter. We saw the list of incarnations. Clear, right? Okay. We can just go to this breakup and try to see the verses in context to that. That will make the flow very easy for you to understand. Okay. So then, 3rd chapter. We have first 5 verses, Purusha Avataras, because Sutta Goswami is going to speak about the incarnations, and Purusha Avataras are the first incarnations within this material world. Then we have the list of incarnations of the Lord, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the fruit of reciting the mysterious appearances of the Lord. Okay. 30 to 32 is the Lord's gross and subtle material conception, why they are not included in the list of incarnations, and that they are imaginary. Correct? That's why they are not included, because they are not transcendental. The Lord's subtle and gross material conception, this Virata Rupa, Vishwa Rupa or Virata Rupa. It's all right. Okay. Then from 33 to 39, we see how one can realize the Lord and His glories. And there was this analogy of just like because of the living entity takes birth again and again, okay, or because the gross and subtle conception are imposed on the living entity because there's a repetition of birth and death, and there's the context or this analogy of the living entity also that comes here when explaining the transcendental features, not features, the transcendental position of the Lord with respect to His gross and subtle material conception, the universal form and the subtle form, subtle conception. So when that is done, then Suta Goswami speaks about self-realization, which means basically realizing both the Lord as well as the living entity. Right? So that happens in 33 and 34. Then the glories of the Lord are mentioned in 35 and 36. Then 37 is that the Lord is unknowable by mental speculation and only devotion service reveals the Lord. So ultimately concluding that even to know the pastimes of the incarnations of the Lord and to understand all these different gross, subtle material conceptions and every other thing, one must render devotion service. Then only he can understand the Lord and His pastimes, both in the material world as well as in the spiritual world. Okay. Then 40 to 44, we have the Suta Goswami says that now he is going to explain about, or rather now he is going to recite Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, because it's the essence of all scriptures. And Krishna, after Krishna left this world, and then Dharma took shelter in Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is an answer to question 6. Okay. And fourth we saw just now. So I think that's okay. So you should be okay with that. Correct? Okay. Now coming to one question that you had on Suta Goswami not being well versed in other Vedic scriptures. Correct?
Gopal, end of the purport mentioned the way of chanting the mantras.
Yes. He explains, and see, Suta basically means he is not
Brahman family.
he's not, the father is either the father is a Suta, okay, father and mother are Suta, or else the father is of a lower class than the wife. Then Pratiloma, that's called Pratiloma. So if the wife is a Brahmana and the father is a Kshatriya, the one who is born, he has a mixed nature. Okay, because he might have Kshatriya nature, he might have Brahmana nature also. Those who take a Brahminical position, they can recite Puranas. And those who take up Kshatriya nature, they can do some other Kshatriya type activities. Something like that is there in the Shastra. So they are called Sutas. Suta means one who is born of this mixture where the wife is of a higher class. But no, so that way, Suta Goswami might not have been trained in Vedic mantras, reciting Yajurveda, Samaveda like this, but he is fully realized in reciting the Puranas. Okay. Because Romaharshana Suta, he was given authority by Vyasadeva of the Puranas and Itihasas. So being his son, he learned from his father. He's the expert or his authority in Puranas and Itihasas. And also now we see Vaishampayana was in Yajurveda, but then Vyasadeva also asked him to recite the Mahabharata. So Vaishampayana also recited the Itihasa Mahabharata to Janmeja.
Bro, apart from Bhagavatam, any other Puranas were discussed in this assembly level speeches?
Yeah, when we look at the other Puranas, as far as I remember, there's also mentioned that the Saunakadi Rishis are there in assembly. Whether they're performing sacrifices or not, I am not very clearly able to remember. Okay, but the assembly was there, and Suta Goswami spoke about other Puranas also in that assembly. So he did speak. Suta Goswami spoke other Puranas to Saunakadi Rishis.
But the last one was Bhagavatam.
Yes, the essence of all scriptures.
But then why did they have these questions at all? Not from the beginning, just from the middle.
I don't know. Right from the start itself, they could have asked that speak only the essence, don't speak something else. Yeah. I think there's a reason for that also. One thing based on my readings which I can understand is that the assembly see, just like the Vedic literatures, the Puranas especially, are divided based on the moods. Right? The Sattva-guna, Rajaguna, and Tamoguna. There are six Puranas for each of the moods. And these Puranas are meant for that kind of people who are in that influenced by that mood. So when Suta Goswami spoke, the other Puranas, then he spoke it based on the quality of people who were there in the assembly. This is my understanding. So he spoke the other Puranas for benefiting them. But when he spoke to this assembly, he could see that this assembly is qualified to hear Srimad Bhagavatam or transcendental literature. Maybe. Because as I was see Tattva Sandarbha somewhere, or I think it's mentioned something like this. The Puranas are spoken. Basically, these Puranas are meant for those who are in Tamoguna. They might not be able to elevate themselves. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is meant for Paramahamsas. Right? Paramahamsa Samhita. You see. And those who are in ignorance, they might not be able to appreciate Srimad Bhagavatam on the same level. For them, the gradual process of elevation was required. So those Puranas are also spoken. But this assembly, in which Shaunaka Rishi is representing, all the other sages, looks like they are qualified to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's why it was spoken at the end. Yes. Okay. Anything else? I just wanted to tell one more thing. We saw this, that in second chapter, we saw that when this Manvantaras were being discussed, Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he writes that Srila Swami says that there is no devastation after any Manvantara, but Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur say that there is a difference, there is a devastation in the Manvantara. We discussed a little bit on how to understand it, but we did not complete, or rather, I just wanted to give a conclusive way to understand this. See, we cannot question of who is right and who is wrong in this context. We cannot say that, then what actually happens? Is there a devastation or not? Because this, we cannot perceive through our senses. Whether devastation is going to happen, all those things. This is the Acharya's opinion. And whatever the Acharya says, we just respectfully accept. That's all. So now, in our practical day-to-day life, day-to-day devotional service, what we are doing, whether devastation happens at the end of Manvantara or not is actually not very important. From our actual devotional point of view. So we'll see such kind of apparent contradictions that will appear among the opinions of the Acharyas. So we just accept it. This is the opinion of this particular Acharya, and this Acharya says like this. Fine, that's it. We accept them, we pay our humble obeisances and move forward. We cannot question, because one is we are limited. Our understanding of the Shastras is also limited. We are not on the level of Acharyas, and we cannot see what they are seeing. Their vision is completely different from our vision. They can see transcendent. They can see so many things through their transcendental vision, which we cannot see. So passing opinions or making a judgment of who is right and who is wrong is actually not very conducive. It's not conducive at all for our devotional service. So when the Acharyas speak with apparent contradiction, we just accept as it is, that it's Arshavakya. The Rishi has spoken, this is what it is. Move forward and concentrate more on our devotional practices. Because Srimad Bhagavatam, this study itself, our study of Srimad Bhagavatam, not only this course, but whoever studies Srimad Bhagavatam, the presentation of Srila Prabhupada is primarily devotional. It's primarily devotion, and by reading these translations, by reading the purports, one should get intense desire to engage in devotional service, to surrender to Krishna, to become pure devotees. That is the goal. Technically there are some points which we try to understand, which will strengthen this particular goal. But if you find such apparent contradictions and all, don't worry about them. Don't worry about them, just move forward. One thing I just wanted to tell. And one more question that came in the first class was about Shukdev Goswami being a Brahmavadi or a Vaishnava. Do you remember that verse where it was mentioned that Shukdev Goswami was a Vaishnava? Don't remember. Let us check. So I saw that, and let us see. So we can just close that also. It's not in the first chapter, it's in the second chapter, right? Okay, Srila Sukadeva Goswami was a Vaishnava from the beginning. This is the second verse. Okay, so here in this are you able to see? So this is actually in the context of the Dvija, or after an ordinary birth. Okay, he becomes a Dvija. Then he goes through different purificatory processes. Okay, of coming to the stage of Brahmana. So in that context, Srila Prabhupada writes that Sukadeva Goswami was a Vaishnava and he did not have to go through the purificatory process. And that's why he left. Because finally he says that a progressive Brahmana must necessarily become a Vaishnava, or Vaishnava is a self-realized Brahmana. So the context is, purification is being made. Generally man is from ordinary being to becoming a Vaishnava. There is this purificatory process that has to be gone through. But Sukadeva Goswami was a Vaishnava from the beginning, so therefore he did not go through any purificatory process. So in that context of undergoing purificatory process, Srila Prabhupada writes that he was a Vaishnava, therefore he does not have to undergo purificatory process like this. But from Shastra itself and from Bhagavatam itself, we understand that he played the pastime of being engaged in this monistic philosophy and this impersonal Brahman, being engaged in impersonal Brahman. But we do understand that Sukadeva Goswami, for the Sukadeva Goswami, it was just a pastime, just a passing phase, and it happened only for very less amount of time. He was born, he went out of his house, Vyasdev sent his disciples, they recited Bhagavatam, he came back to his house, studied Srimad Bhagavatam, and that's it. All monastic philosophy ends there. So here also, Prabhupada writes, Srila Sukadeva Goswami was a Vaishnava from the beginning, he says. He does not say from the birth. Okay, so in that way we can understand that when he says beginning, means after he was instructed by Srila Vyasdev, that point itself.
Not from birth.
Not from birth. From that point onwards, he was a Vaishnava. He played that role just like a pastime, just unfolded like a pastime. So it's like this. So on the context, we can understand, rather than resorting to some very esoteric explanation. In the context, Srila Prabhupada writes like this. Okay, that he's a Vaishnava from the beginning. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai.